right. Hey, everyone. My name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the Tea. Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. So we are very excited about these June episodes. I told you we we're going to be discussing all things Black men. Last week, we got into mental health and the law. We had Judge Tark Johnson on. This week, we are going to be discussing Black men in mental health counseling and a lot of issues related to Black men seeking help. And then we're going to shift that conversation on to the barbershop talk as well as the church. But without further ado, I would like to let you know to go ahead and drop comments and questions in the chat as we go ahead and get started, because it is my sincere pleasure to introduce Mr. Roby Murphy, LPC. Mr. Murphy is a licensed professional counselor, school counselor, and educator. He is a two-time alum of Troy University. His background is in counseling and education, and it spans the last 11 years. And a lot of people consider life to be short, but Mr. Murphy, he has the philosophy that life is the longest thing a person will do, which is why he believes in doing whatever is going to make him happy. Welcome to the show, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Tarver.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. We have been so excited about getting this conversation going, so we're going to jump right into it. So I was doing a little research. The New Boys and Men Project, launched out of the Center of Children and Families, talks about all the disparities that Black males face. So education, employment, life expectancy, earnings, and of course, disproportionately represented in the justice system. So how do some of those factors contribute to the mental health of Black men, our men and our young adults, and our youth for that matter?
I mean, I think that they kind of like represent like all we are, like, just as Black men, like there are so many different things coming at us, like when we talk about like those disparities, especially like worried about the criminal justice system. I can, talk about me, like, and I have pretty good relationships like with police officers and things like that, but there's still like a fear, like when those situations happen, like, am I going to be a hashtag? I'm going to be the person thrown out my car, thrown on the ground, there's just so many different pressures, I think, going on for just Black men. I mean, I think it's for men in general, but like that marginalization of us as Black men, we just have so many very specific pressures.
Yes, yeah, you get that, your heart stops when you see that police car. And even if it might be temporary and you're like, okay, we safe, it's all right. There's still that moment where you think, okay, could this go to the left? Am I going to be treated different? One of my guests who transitioned from female to male said he got arrested 11 times after his transition.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Transitioned to a Black male and said, I have not been stopped by the police that many times ever in my life.
I wonder, I don't know, I'm still learning about like trans population, but I wonder if they like really think about as they're transitioning, do they really think about, oh, will I be affected like those stigmas that the other gender face? Is that gonna affect me? Like, like you often hear women complain about working in professional settings and not, being respected the same way as men are. I wonder if trans women like experience that during the transition, or just, different things like of that nature.
I don't know that people think about that necessarily as they're kind of trying to figure out this integrating all the parts of themselves so it's more consistent. But I know he thinks about it now. So now he's much more aware of that, but that just goes to show that being a Black male, there are a lot of other factors that come along with it that we don't even think about. You're right. As a woman, I very much have a different experience driving down the street than I know my Black male son does. When he drives down the street, we both have red vehicles. But I know for him, I get the little heart palpitations and my breath stops a little bit. But for him, it's like, okay, I'm not going to actually feel comfortable until I make it to my location, because I'm not sure that police aren't going to show up somewhere else along this route. So it definitely, I think, is showing up in other ways. As you think about some of these challenges, the fear, the stigma, the being profiled, the problems with employment, underemployment, being underpaid, difficulties in relationships, and all of the things that come along. We put a lot of pressure on Black males in a lot of different ways. Do you think that that may be contributing to why Black men struggle with coming to therapy in the first place, not wanting to be judged and not wanting to be stigmatized, carrying all this weight?
I think that's a stigma, but I also think like as Black men, we're very much conditioned to be strong. We're very much conditioned to be providers. We're very much conditioned to work hard. And historically, therapy was seen as something for, crazy people, or it was seen as a weakness in some form or fashion. And so I think, historically as Black people, we're a race that's kind of been taught just in general to endure. That's basically the basis and theme for our entire race of people. We just endure the things we don't like and we just keep going, but I think for Black men, like, Black women, I think Black women got on board with therapy way longer than Black men did. They was like, hey, this is too hard for me, like, or I'm going through something. It's okay to be, talk to somebody. It's okay to let my feelings out. It's just a different kind of thing with Black men. I even caught myself a couple of years ago as a therapist. Well, I was a school counselor. I'm still a school counselor, but I caught myself having a hard time at work, and I'm pretty sure I could have diagnosed myself with generalized anxiety disorder at the time. And, I talk about it like to some of my friends, like I sat on those feelings for maybe like 2 months because I kept trying to tell myself like, oh, it'll be fine. You can just keep going. You don't have time for that. Like, you don't have time to be vulnerable. You don't have time to be weak. But I was like really struggling. And it was when I remember feeling this anxiety about work, even on the weekends. And it really got to a place where my favorite time of the day was sleep, because that was the only time that it wasn't happening. Like this anxiety, I felt it in my chest, I felt it in my body, like it was there all the time. So finally I was like, okay, let's just bite the bullet. And finally,
it's not getting better.
Yeah. But I think too, like even from a therapist standpoint, a lot of people say, well, you're a therapist, you can't need a therapist, which is very much untrue.
That's so untrue. See mine next Thursday, standing appointment.
So I just think, it's the way we're reared, it's the way we're conditioned. There's just not a lot of safe spaces for Black men to be vulnerable, to be weak, or perceived weakness, I should say. We live in a very much toxic masculinity when it comes to that. But I do think we're learning, we're growing. One of the things I really love about my students is they seem to have more of a space to be vulnerable than my generation did. Like, I really enjoy their conversations with each other when they're talking about mental health or just talking about the things going on in their world. They're very open, and I can appreciate that about them.
And the title of this is Permission to Heal, and I think you are getting into some of that. That Black males are not socialized in the same ways as Black females to be able to heal. So like you said, Black women, we got on board with therapy sooner, but that's because we were socialized to be able to seek help. Now, granted, we still struggled with the same types of things, like, because like you said, Black folks, we so used to suffering, we don't even know we're suffering. We normalize it like, no, this is just life. And so sometimes it's hard for us to tell when something actually is things that we need to be seen for, because we'll just like, oh no, life is stressful, so I'm supposed to have some stress, I'm supposed to be able to push through and deal with all of these stuff, and we normalize it and don't recognize, like you said, it was 2 months before you were like, well, no, I think this a little bit more deeper. Like, these symptoms aren't getting any better. And so at some point, either I'm going to get worse or I'm going to have to address something to allow me to get better. But talk to us a little bit about how our young males are being socialized. You mentioned your students, now you're seeing the shift in terms of them being able to express themselves and talk more about mental health. But I know that my generation of males, and this is folks in their 40s right now, who were not socialized to talk about mental health. And so talk about some of those differences between maybe how people were socialized previously and what maybe we're doing a little different now for our males.
I think the schools kind of respond differently, and some parents respond differently. I do think that's an area that like a lot of parents are still kind of struggling with. I almost feel like they're still very much. I don't want to talk to them about their mental health because I don't want to, put that idea in their head or give that idea to them. But I do feel like, we're having conversations like both my schools did a presentation called Love Like Lexi, and they talked about a young lady who completed suicide, and her mother came out and did the presentation with our students. And I wasn't really sure how they were going to respond to that because, I just never know which version of them I'm going to get sometimes, but they really, really responded well. They really, a lot of them cried. A lot of them came forward to talk about like their feelings. And, I think it was really, really good. Like we encourage them, like even in our counseling sessions, me and my co-counselors, we go around the class, and one of the classes and one of the conversations we have is like, within this school building, you need to find at least one trusted adult, one person that you feel like you can be vulnerable with. I think we're having the dialogue, we're having the conversations, we're making it, and then that forces them to have the dialogue with each other. They're having the conversations that we didn't have growing up. Nobody was talking about suicide or any of those
No,
things.
sir. I was about to say that would have never happened in the school I went to.
Exactly. And then when we talked about suicide, it was like, well, what happened to that person? Like, why did they do that? Like, they had such a good life, or they must have had a bad life. They had like bad parents. They were being abused. This was why those things were happening. And really it can happen to somebody who has everything. They can have everything they ever wanted, but those feelings are still there. They're still fighting. A lot of times they're fighting every day of their life and people don't have any clue. So I just think, it came from a place that I think we decided to change, just society. We started to have the dialogue. I think, after watching students, children, people kill themselves year after year, complete suicide, we started to change the dialogue. Like, we have to address this because it's happening, and it's happening more and more. So clearly there's something wrong. And so I think they were just fortunate enough to grow up in that kind of generation.
Well, I think hopefully that one of the things that maybe affected them is as we got to be adults, we realized some of the limitations of not addressing these things.
Absolutely.
It used to be a time where we didn't think Black people completed suicide.
We didn't.
That was a lack of education on our part, a lack of knowing, a lack of understanding, because we weren't talking about it. And I'll never forget, for anybody that ever watched, the Nickelodeon and the Disney kind of things growing up, Jet Jackson, the little show. You remember that? And this little young Black male completed suicide, and he was the first, I think, image to me of a Black male completing suicide. And I thought, here is this, and this is, my lack of knowledge and education. Here's this young male who is a star, a TV star, grew up.
He was currently on a hit show. He was on the Zoe Dial at the time.
Look, I mean, he transitioned from childhood into adulthood, still being able to act. And we know that a lot of child actors and actresses don't necessarily get that transition into adulthood, and he did. And we were like, what is going on? Like, couldn't be suicide. Must be, like you said, we started asking all these questions. Well, it must have been something. And then we find out he had been struggling with mental illness for years. And I think that to me was the first face that I could put on it that made it feel a little real to me. And for some people that happened when Chelsea Chris completed suicide, and people were like, well, but you Miss USA, like, why would you do that? Life is, and then you go back and you find out that she had been struggling, and a lot of negative attention had been given to her because she wanted to get out of law and do something else. And people were like, no, you carrying the weight of folks. We need you. You can't do that. And so we think about humanizing people like we have no idea what you're actually dealing with that would have gotten you to the place of suicide. And I do think that is one of the struggles, as you talked about, with Black males, is that people don't give you permission to be able to say that you're not okay.
Yeah, like a lot of people don't think that Black kids, they think of it like it's white kids. Black kids don't cut, they don't do those types of things. They don't do self-injurious behaviors, but they do. A lot of them, and it's more boys out there doing it than people think it is. a lot of people just say, oh, it's just something that girls do, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not the case.
Mm-hmm. And then specifically, we say it's something that white girls do.
Exactly.
And so we don't even think about all the different ways that our Black males are harming themselves. You
Hmm.
can harm yourself through overeating. You can
Hmm.
harm yourself through risky sexual behavior. You can
Definitely.
harm yourself by being in gang activity.
Hmm.
You can harm yourself by being in criminal activity, breaking into people's cars and homes. I mean, all of these behaviors really could be characterized as self-harm behaviors. They're destructive,
Yeah.
and
I can
ultimately they
remember.
hurt you.
I can remember having a student and asking him like, "Well, what is your plan? For we were talking about now we're talking about regular stuff. We're talking about school. Talking about like, what do you want to do when you graduate? Like he was failing class. And I was like, well, like what is your game plan? Like, what is you plan on doing with your life? And he was like, oh, well, I don't see myself growing up. I was like, and it kind of caught me. We get caught off guard as therapists, counselors. Like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, I don't see anything happening after this.
Like they can't even visualize a future for them. You talk about hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like a lot of our Black males are hopeless. They don't even see like what, and then we haven't even gotten into like what happens in developing your identity. Like one of our viewers was like, men, Black males are not allowed to be able to express feelings, but they're also typecast. I think a lot of times. So you're talking about this young male, like, so if you're not an athlete, or maybe you're an athlete and you get injured,
Yeah.
or if you don't, because we're Black males, I think, are taught that who you are is based on what you do.
Hmm. I would
Where
say, like, for me, like, a lot of my identity was tied into, like, when I was a student. So I was not a Black male that was an athlete. I like to make this running joke that I didn't get any of those good Black people skills. I can't sing, can't dance, and I'm not athletic. But a lot of what I was doing, I was good at school for a little while, till I wasn't. But then once I got to be an adult, a lot of my identity was tied into like my professional life. Like, what am I going to do as a counselor? What am I going to do as a therapist? And it was recently a conversation I had with one of my friends where we talked about I kind of stopped identifying professional goals. Not that I don't care about that. I do really very much care about that. But I realized that I had developed all these professional goals and then I didn't have any like personal goals. Like I was like, somewhere along the line, I stopped developing me as a person, or maybe I never developed me as a person.
Mhm.
Maybe I've always been developing myself professionally, and maybe personal me always took a back seat to that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Because that's what you'll get reinforced for. You'll get reinforced for having those professional goals. How many times, and we can shift to this social media conversation and the effect of social media on Black male identity development, and ability to be vulnerable and transparent and express themselves. Because I
Mhm.
do think the pressure is, what do you do? I mean, how many times do you get introduced to somebody and the first thing they ask you is, what do you do?
I'm guilty
Um,
of it.
yeah, right. Like, so, because we have been taught that worth has to do with what you do. So it's no wonder our young males are out here numbing themselves, and as adult men grow up to numb themselves in various ways. Because if I don't feel like I have anything that's tangible and valid to make me have some worth, then I don't feel like I am anybody.
Like, even think about this, like from this perspective, like Black men, like so we talk about like stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms have like, it's a thankless job because nobody cares or whatever.
Mm-mm.
But in some ways, stay-at-home dads get hit even worse because, like, hey, what you doing staying at home? Men's supposed to be working. Hey, you need to get out there and get you a job. Like, what you doing?
Absolutely.
Like, you can't get a babysitter or somebody. Like, you need to go out with you. So you letting her take care of everything. Like, we attach a lot of our society does it to us too, but we attach a lot of our worth to how much money we make, how much we're able to provide. Like, even though he is providing something for his family, which is necessary, hey, I'm staying home to take care of my kids, it's not deemed as worthy enough.
Absolutely. We will call you a bum. There was a whole
Yeah.
song written about you. You a scrub. If
Scrub.
you right, because we're looking at you like, if you don't have a home and you don't have a car and you don't have a way to, because again, this is how men identity development is
Mhm.
created. You are supposed to be the provider and the protector. So if you are not the provider and protector, then who are you? You're a lazy bum out here. Now, we have no idea about any of the circumstances why,
Yeah.
like, hey, I wanted her to go ahead. She's worked hard. She's going back to school. She supported me. When I got mine, I'm supporting her. So I took off and stayed at home. So we have no idea what's going on, but we pass judgment on you.
Absolutely.
And we do tend to be very judgmental of Black males. And I do think that that's part of some of this social media influence as well. I hear a lot of conversation around Black men being identified as alpha or beta or simps, the toxic male. There's this awful phenomenon going on around males getting out here doing some very unsavory things in terms of dating. It's very cringy. That they have websites out here devoted to teaching men how to essentially prey on people to get dates, people who are intoxicated, touching people, like just all. And I
But if
think about, how does that affect the male when these are the images that you see?
But if you really think about it, like that's how, like, even back in the day, like, I mean it's still going on now, but like that's how you equated your manhood, by how many women you had, how many women were attracted to you, what you were doing with them, how many sexual conquests you had. Like all of that is tied into, like, I even hear this amongst my students and stuff sometimes. They're in some ways I don't know, they're not as cringy. I think they recognize certain things because society has kind of taken some of a shift, but then in some ways they're like, that's more problematic than what we were doing. Like,
Right. Well, they got access to more.
they do have access to more. I mean, honestly, I mean, if you don't set your parental controls on your phone, your 3-year-old could be watching a porn video, and he was on YouTube just 2 minutes ago, but
Right. And you think he's watching the Seven Dwarfs, and these dwarfs have penises.
yeah. One thing parents don't think about either with YouTube is like the ads. You can't ever like say what the ads are going to be. It could be a child's thing, but this is a very adult ad that they're watching. So, but you're right. They just have access to so many different things that honestly, we have to work hard to get access to those types of things.
Absolutely. But then, and then getting that access, it gives this false illusion of how people are living, and it gives people a lot of opportunities to weigh in and be judgmental on life. One of our viewers, Reverend Amirlis West, just talked about Russell Wilson, this whole simp thing. And so you're out like, what are you doing expressing all this love publicly for this woman? She got you played out here. And that males are afraid that if they openly speak about that they love someone, that they value someone, appreciate someone, that they respect someone's boundaries, that they say, hey, we waited to have sex, because as you talked about, sometimes a male identity is wrapped up, because that's how they're socialized, to be in your sexual prowess. So if you're not out here having several sexual partners, then you're not a man.
Yeah, and I think it's too, like, I'll comment on Russell Wilson Sierra. I think people have a hard time with her because of who she previously dated. She dated very, very what would be considered to be alpha men. But at the same time, they feel like Russell Wilson's just like, he's a great football player, but he's like this kind, gentle man. He's not really, he's not in the streets. He's not doing that thing. He's just really kind of like a simple family man, honestly, with money. So, and I think that's really, really hard. I almost feel like it almost comes off like people didn't feel like, I don't know if it's about him or honestly about her. It's almost like people felt like because she was a single mother, like that she didn't deserve this kind of love or this kind of, she doesn't deserve to be with this kind of man or whatever. But if they're happy, what difference does it make?
But that's the thing about having a secure identity and worth in yourself, that you're not necessary. But I think for a lot of people, social media is where their worth and identity and their value comes from. And we can transition to just this introduction of influences like YouTube, like being exposed to porn at early ages, hearing sexually explicit conversations, or watching sexually explicit movies at early ages, and how that shapes the development of our young Black males. Because I know a lot of times there is stigma associated with Black males being molested, and when I see men in therapy, they'll always say, "Oh no, that wasn't a big deal," and I tell them it was, and it
Mhm.
affected you, but because they've been taught, no, man, I would want somebody. I mean, people will say to men, "I would want somebody having molested me. That would have been, I would have loved that." You know, just
Yeah.
dismissing the whole aspect of this trauma and how this trauma has affected the development of this young male now into manhood. So let's talk a little bit about those experiences and how they affect Black men in their mental
I,
health, but also their identity.
I think it's just such a culture of like, at least it previous was a culture of like, like I said before, of, having so many sexual partners, having,
Mhm.
like being, we're like, before everybody's like, oh, let's get married. Now we're in the generation of people want to be free. They want to be more open. They want to try different things, which there's nothing wrong with having different types of relationships, as long as everybody involved know what's going on.
Come
But
on,
I
consent.
gotta get that consent on there. But I think the quality of relationships has kind of changed. Like it was just a culture of push, like you need to have quantity over quality, like
Mm,
the amount of women you had. That was the culture or whatever and stuff like that when it came to especially Black men, like athletes and stuff like that. That's the kind of culture that was kind of being pushed down their throat. And like so they were having this early sexual relationship like before they were brains were really developed, and they kind of just kept rolling with that type of relationship. Like, let's keep
mhm,
going, let's do it over and over again. Like I want to
mhm.
get that same feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely feel like it, sex is so much. Emotionally,
Yeah.
mentally, fit like it's all of these things. And when you start engaging in sexual behaviors at such an early age, when you don't fully understand
Hmm.
who you are as a being, much less as a sexual being, or you
Yeah.
feel pressured. Um, I can't even remember the rapper's name that caught flack because he talked about bringing, I think it was his son and a
Little
nephew,
Boosie.
yeah, that clown, um, to a strip club or getting them their
Yeah.
first sexual experience. Like, oh, you 18, we're gonna get you your first. Like these are grown women. Like
Yeah.
what in the whole world are you thinking about exposing these grown women to these children? But that's that part of that rites of passage piece. And I do think a lot of young males grew up in an environment where they felt like they had to, they felt pressured to explore this sexual aspect of themselves, or they weren't going to be considered to be a alpha male or a strong male or right. So we people use a lot of negative words to describe males if you didn't want to engage in those types of things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think another component of this too is, you talked about a different range, like you talked about Russell Wilson, like he's just a family man. He's not interested in for them
Drama.
streets. But we talk about what are the different ranges and different types of Black males, and does that potentially affect whether or not they would see themselves going to counseling. For example, that alpha male, that alpha male, alpha Black male, less likely to go to counseling than that beta male, than that simp, and these are social media terms, y'all. I'm not calling nobody this.
So
You know,
Russell
it
Wilson definitely been called a simp a lot lately.
they do. They really call him a
Yeah.
simp as if he is being taken advantage of and exploited in some way, instead of like, no, this is a range of who Black men are. You don't have to be at one extreme or the other. They're not, they don't have to be negative in competition with each other. They can
Mhm.
just simply be like, here are the ways that I express who I am as a male. And that can look different for different people, and neither is right or wrong. They're just
Yeah.
different.
I think like to answer your question, I just think like alpha males, like well, males in general aren't conditioned again like for therapy, but like that alpha male it's gonna always come back to I don't want to be perceived to be as weak. And even if they go to therapy, a lot of times they're gonna struggle to be open and honest with somebody else, that I'm going to therapy. But you gotta think about Black male, like we don't just have a problem with mental health, we have a problem with physical health as well. We have a problem going to the doctor, like, oh, I broke my arm, but it's gonna heal, like, or I sprained my ankle. Well, you really broke it. You really need to go get a cast. But so I mean, I just think that's an ongoing problem for us as far as, and maybe it's, maybe it's some condition from all the way from slavery. I don't know, but maybe we're just conditioned not to stop when, we don't have time to stop for every little ache and pain. We don't have time to stop for every day. Like, back in the day, I have to feed my family, so I got to keep going.
I mean, I definitely think there's some remnants of white supremacy in that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you brought into an arena and put on a block for people
Yeah,
to look at you and you spin around and strip you down naked to see what your prowess is. I mean, that is going to have some lasting effects from generation to generation. And I
and you
do
have to
feel,
think about
yeah,
it from this perspective. Like, probably, I mean, only the strong survived. Like, a lot of people who were weaker, their lineage didn't get to go on. Like, those people
absolutely.
died
And
out.
some of them were just straight up killed. Like, oh no,
Yeah,
we don't want you procreating with anybody. We don't want any more.
exactly.
You all are broken. So we're going to stop this line. So yeah, I don't think anybody wants to be seen as defective.
Hmm.
But also I think there's that piece too. If I acknowledge that something's wrong, then I got to deal with it. It makes it real.
Oof, you said a word there.
Right. That's why it took you a couple of months to go see about yourself. That's why it took me.
Right, because I was
Uh,
lying to myself for a long time. Like, you're fine. It's gonna be fine.
it'll it'll go away. You'll be all right. You'll
Yeah.
be all
You're
right.
gonna wake up one morning, it's gonna be away. And you're like, whew,
Absolutely,
that was
absolutely,
tough.
absolutely. And again, and you're a mental health provider and educated about the benefits of and talk to people about the benefits, but it was still a struggle because I think there is that part of us that feels like, no, it's gonna be okay. It's not that bad. And even though we know that's destructive, like there's still that like I don't want to have to really deal with the reality of this thing that could be difficult
Yeah.
for me to be able to handle.
I also think too that comes back to just American culture in general. I won't even just put that as just black people, but like American culture is so like go 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 all the time that you don't have time. Like you hear people say all the time, I don't have time to be sick. I don't have time to stop doing what I'm doing.
And I think you're absolutely right about that. And that goes back to the provider and protector,
Hmm.
right? So if I don't, I was on a show last week talking about the Reverend Garrett told it himself, so I know he won't mind me telling it. Uh, but he said he injured himself during an outreach, but he didn't want to stop because he was like, these other people, they came out here to help. I don't want to stop, and what does that look like for them? And so he didn't even tell his wife, nobody, that he was injured. And by the time he told his wife and she made him go see about it, the doctor was like, well, now it's healed. Like,
Yeah,
so it was fractured, but now the fracture has fixed itself. But now you're going to have some problems because the fracture didn't heal itself properly because you continued to walk on it. And he said, before I ask somebody for some water, I dig me a well. And and he said, and I know that's unhealthy, but we laughed about it because it just goes to show the extent of how we feel like we have to show up for people
hmm.
in ways that we don't show up for ourselves.
I mean, I even think about it from terms of like PTO at work. Like, how much PTO do I have because I don't take off for being sick
Mm-hmm.
or, come up? Like, I think COVID really kind of changed the game for a lot of us because it forced us to kind of have to be off when we were sick.
Mm-hmm.
But like, but prior to that, like, I had like hours and hours and hours of PTO time. Like, I could have been off for maybe before I switched jobs, maybe 27 days straight just based off my
Yeah,
PTO.
absolutely. And this is how we grew up, right? Like you, so you're lazy. Why are you not going to work? Why are you not going to school? You could be sick, you still going to school.
Hmm.
Can you walk? Okay then. And so what that taught us is it taught us to dismiss ourselves.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, because that's reinforced so much, I mean, many of us probably have stories of Black men working themselves to death, literally.
But we watched our parents do it. Our
We watched,
parents, they dismiss their own feelings like, oh, I'm gonna
absolutely.
go to work today. I'm not feeling well, but I'm still gonna go because I need to go. Have the lead time. I'm still not gonna miss work, and so we just perpetuate that cycle. Now I try to do better about, oh, I got the lead time. Let me just take a day here and there.
And
But
yeah, and be intentional about planning that so I don't get burned out, so I don't end up, how many times did we hear during COVID that you just mentioned, Black males dying? How many Black men died in their 30s and 40s during COVID? And we find out, oh, you had underlying heart issues, or you had
But
high blood
they never
pressure,
went to the
or
doctor.
you had never gone to the doctor. And it was taken, it took generations of Black men out.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, no, they were just at work. They were fine. What you mean they're dead? But we don't realize, and this is the silent killer, heart disease, definitely among Black men, because it'll sneak up on you.
And there's so many ways that like you could get heart disease. Like, for instance, like, we talk about Black men not wanting to go to the doctor. They don't go to the dentist. Dentist, hey, if you don't take care of your
Absolutely.
teeth, it leads to heart disease. If you're not taking care of your high blood pressure, it leads to heart disease. A lot of folks don't know diabetes complications lead to heart issues. So
Come on, speak that word, because a lot of folks don't know about that dental health can affect that heart.
they don't.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it is important. One of our viewers like, oh no, you going to the doctor? Let's go. But sometimes you just do have to have people in your life who are going to say, hey, Black man, I love you. Let's go to the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've told my clients to phrase it in that you do your absolute best to take care of this family and love on us and make sure we have. I need for you to do this for me.
I think too, like for me, I had to restructure my thoughts too. And we've grown up like knowing this, but I had to really restructure my thoughts. You can't take care of anybody if you're not taken care of.
Come
You
on,
can't
sir.
take care of anybody if you don't do the things you need to do for yourself first. And so, and thinking about that, I want to be there for family, friends, whoever I need to be there for. Like, okay, I'm having a hard time, whatever it may be. I'm tired.
Burned
Not
out.
there mentally. I just need to take a day off. So take the day off.
Absolutely.
Do what you need to do to get yourself together. Go for a walk, work out.
Take an actual vacation. Use them 22 consecutive days of sick leave you done built up.
So yeah. But
Well,
we're all guilty.
Oh yeah, we definitely are. And I do, people like the reset piece. I do recognize that sometimes the case is that Black males have had a negative experience with a provider too.
Yeah.
So I have had Black men say, look, I'm ready to attend to my mental health. I understand I've been through, because I want you to find me a Black person that ain't been through some trauma. I've been through some things. I want to go in and get addressed. They go in, then they have this negative experience. So either they're mandated to go, they don't get to pick the provider, and it ends up being a negative experience, or they go with who their insurance recommends or whatever, and then they come in and they're not validated because the therapist is like, yeah, suck it up, you're a Black male, you fine, what you up in here for, whining?
That's it. I think too, like the Columbus market is so hard because like there will be a couple of good, like really Black therapists, Black male therapists for a while. And it's just such a hard place for young millennials in general. Like, if you're really more of an established family person, then then it's fine. But like it's just really a hard place for people to grow. Like, especially if you're trying to grow your business sometimes and they feel like they can grow in a bigger market. And so a lot of people move up the road to Atlanta. Like I had a situation where a friend asked me like, hey, I want a therapist and I want a Black man therapist. Well, I can't be your therapist. So I was like, I don't know anybody. Like I literally got on the Psychology Today website, like looking to see if I could find like a Black male therapist for this. There are a couple of us in the area, but it's not a lot of us. And I was like, hey, this guy's a LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. He may be really good. I don't know this guy at all. Like, let me
Yeah,
just
I've done that too. Here's some names. I don't know these folks.
But hopefully he can help you. But I mean, it's even the wait time right now. Like, there's just not enough clinicians to go around for the amount of trauma that I think we've all collectively experienced because of the pandemic, this inflation. They like to say we're going to be in a recession. I think the recession is here.
Look, it's been going on. I don't know why y'all act like y'all don't know. We feel it.
One of my friends she lives in California, and she just talked about how gas is $8 a gallon in California. So that blew my mind. So
and they can't walk.
it's not a walking.
It's too spread out.
So I think the recession is here. This may even be worse than the 2008 recession. So
Right. And like you said, I don't think it's going anywhere. What recommendations would you have for people who want to be supportive of the Black males in their life? When you recognize, hey, you're not okay, because sometimes other people see we're not okay before we do. What would be your recommendations for people to talk to the Black males in their lives that they love about getting some help?
So one thing I can say about most of us, and I probably shouldn't make this generalization, is we're stubborn. But I will make that generalization. You have to come at us. You can't come at us like aggressively about like what you want us to do just because we're just not going to respond to that. And historically, Black men, like if you come at us with aggression and you're not a person that we can be aggressive with, like our wives, our moms, our sisters, some that type of person, our kids, then we're just going to shut down altogether because I can't be aggressive with you. I don't know how to respond to this. I think too, you have to so two things. You have to let them know that you see a problem, and then I think we're all individuals. You have to ask them, how do you want me to be? How do you want me to support you?
Oh,
You
come
know,
on, asking people for what they need.
how do you want to be me to support you? And then respecting how they want you to support them, even if it's something that you don't like. I think, a lot of times people try to force upon the support in the way that they think is best for us, but just ask them, how do you want to be supported in this? Do you want me to schedule an appointment? Do you want to go on a vacation? Do you need a massage? Whatever it is that they specifically need, just ask them how they want to be supported.
It is, I think that tough part for people when they see someone they love struggling and we want to be able to help. Right. And so we can be intrusive and,
But I mean,
in our helping.
but you can't force. That's the one thing I think being a therapist taught me, like that you can't force your viewpoints, your values, how you
Mhm.
feel about everything on other people. People have to come to these decisions for themselves, and sometimes it may be destructive and it may not be what you like, but you have to ride out that this person has the right to have autonomy over themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will definitely say for the men in my life, I openly talk about that I have a brother that's got schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
Mhm.
But I also have a son that has struggled with anxiety and depression. And I'm a licensed psychologist. You think that joker came to me and said, "Hey, my mom's struggling"? Did not.
Didn't say a doggone
Didn't
thing.
say a doggone thing. But he did eventually come to me and say, "Hey, I need to get in some therapy. What recommendations do you have?" And he didn't want me asking mom questions. He's
Mhm.
like, "Look here, woman. Now I told you what I need. I need for you to give me some referrals. Don't be asking me all these questions." Because I was like, "Well, how long? And well, wait. Well, why you ain't say nothing? And what's been right?" And he was like, "Hey, hey, hey, hey,
And
hey."
look, that makes you realize real fast that's why our ethics board exists, because you cannot, you
That's why
cannot.
we can't see family members, right? Like, calm all that down. Calm all that down. And I had to eat all of that and be like, okay, he's an adult. He can do this without you getting all in there. Hey, here's some referrals for you. If you need anything else, let me know. And I did have to wait. I had to wait on him to want to talk about things or ask additional questions, which he did when he felt comfortable to do so, or he needed some guidance or whatever. And his father's a mental health provider too. So his dad, so he didn't even tell his dad. And so I was like, "Look, you didn't hear this from me. But this is going on. Don't you ask no questions." And
You're
he,
like out
you
of
know,
room.
he was struggling. We both over here like, well, did you? And I was like, "Look, we gotta, let him have his process." So I do very much appreciate you saying you have to ask people how they want to be supported and respect that, even if it's not what you want.
That's something I just had to learn. And some days are better than others. And some days you have to wait for people to invite you into certain things before you
That's
just
right.
go in guns
Mhm.
ablazing.
That's right. Absolutely. And we all need to hear that because all of us have a Black male in our lives that we love. And we have to respect their boundaries. We talk about boundaries all the time until it inconveniences us. Like, oh wait, but no, you don't get to have boundaries. Other folks get to have boundaries, and I get to give folk boundaries, but you don't get to have boundaries around your mental health. And yeah,
Absolutely.
and that, so very much I appreciate that. What would you say for mental health providers who may have the occasion to have a Black male come in their office?
Hmm.
What are some things that you would recommend for clinicians who are working with Black males to be supportive, to be culturally appropriate and responsive?
So I would say do your research. You know, find another Black clinician maybe that you could speak to. Hey, I would say we're all not created equally. Some people are, there are some of us Black folks that want you to do your own research and they don't want you to come to us.
That, mm-hmm.
That's a big thing for some of us. But see if you can find somebody who's willing to help you. I will also say there's a lot of research out there that you could look at, but like honestly, from a simple point, I would probably say just if you're good at building relationships, you could probably build a relationship with your client. I think, meet them where they are. If they're hesitant to talk to you, don't probe in there too hard, initially. Most Black men are not going to respond to someone until they get to know them. Find the commonalities, find the things you guys can laugh at. Because the Black folks don't like nothing else. We like to
We
laugh.
do like to laugh.
So, find those things, find our find our sameness, but appreciate our differences.
Mm,
And I think that's where, a lot of clinicians of other color maybe go left, like they can't find the ways that we're the same enough to really like get in there and really meet them where they are.
absolutely. And first of all, let me say this. One, I appreciate you saying like it's resources out there. So if you want to become a culturally competent therapist, you definitely can. Like do the work. Your client shouldn't have to come in here trying to educate you about how to show up and be present for them. Like if you're going to work with
Absolutely.
Black males, do that research, do that work, and make sure this is the population you can serve. Because we can do people disservice when we're seeing them. It can be detrimental because how many times you probably had this experience too. Have I had a Black male come to me and say, I had a really negative experience seeing this provider and I started not to come see anybody else again.
Hmm.
And so then, it puts pressure on. You're like, okay, hold on. All right. So let's kind of unpack that. But a lot of it is about assumptions that
Yeah.
are made and statements that are not accurate because you haven't taken the time to understand this person. I love that. Get to know who this person is first before you start offering up this information that's not accurate for this person.
Hmm.
Because we do bring who we are into a room. So if you have biases, they're going to come out. And that's for us too, because I don't want to make assumptions that Black clinicians don't have biases too.
No, because every
Because
time, like, so when I encounter like non-binary and that's just not an area I feel like I'm gonna ever be well versed in enough. But like, I try to do as much research as I
mhm,
can, with my students, with my clients. But that's one of, just like some white clinicians have a hard time with Black people. That's it's one of my hard areas. I try to make sure I just actually sent an email to somebody and used an inappropriate pronoun and had to go back and apologize, and they really appreciated that.
mhm.
So,
Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, because we're not going to be perfect, but I need to be
mhm,
able to honor my mistakes. Like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. My apologies for that. And we're growing and learning. There's a lot of different ways that we're learning and being able to recognize we don't know everything before we start trying to see people like, oh, I don't have anything else to learn. I always got stuff to learn.
yeah.
And when I stop learning, I probably need to go ahead and get on out this field. What are your recommendations for Black men to take care of themselves? We just talked about that Black males aren't often given permission to heal, permission to feel, permission to say what they need, and not have people tell them, oh yeah, no, this is what you really need right here. So what can Black men do to take good care of them?
I think for one thing, they need to start identifying like kind of things that they like. I think a lot of times we don't like really, we're just living through life. We don't even really know what we like.
Mhm.
Start spending more time to focus on those things, the things that you enjoy, the things that you like, the things that bring you joy, the things that bring you happiness. I think that's a word that we don't use a lot to describe Black men, but
Mhm.
think about the things that bring you happiness. Experience those things, whatever they may be. Make sure those things are healthy.
Mhm.
Because as people, historically, we enjoy a lot of unhealthy things: drugs, promiscuous sex, alcohol, those things in abundance. But just finding the things that you like in life and experience as much as those. Getting enough rest. I think
Oh,
we
come on,
don't
self-care.
we don't do that enough.
Mm.
I'm guilty of that. I know I'm gonna work for 10 hours tomorrow and still gonna go to bed at 12 probably. Um, make that mistake.
I'm gonna be under the bed at 12.
Getting enough rest, drinking water,
Mm.
exercise. That's one of my hard things. Some days I'm good at it, some days I'm bad at it. Really just really sitting down and taking care of yourself. Consuming good foods,
Mm.
healthy
Mm.
foods. Hey,
I was
we
about
didn't
to
grow
say, because good doesn't always equate to healthy.
we didn't grow up on healthy food. We grew up on a lot of unhealthy stuff.
Fat back,
So it's so good though. So
blood pressure through the roof.
but our folks back in the day didn't get it, but
But they were much more active
they
too.
were much more
And we didn't
active.
have as much processed food. Like they ate off the land
Yeah.
more. Like, so they were growing things and eating things. Our stuff comes out of boxes and bags. So I think it balanced out. Not that I'm advocating for a high sodium diet, but I think it balanced out more because they were more active and they ate more fresh stuff that didn't have to be broken down in our bodies uh, in order for it to come
Convenience
out.
really was the destruction for us. Like we want convenience for everything, but we want convenience because we want to be able to work harder. That's really the
Right.
ultimate.
And that is exactly it. Like I need for this meal prep to take less time so I can work more.
Exactly.
Which is why we got all of these air fryers and Instapots and all of this stuff we got over here to cook stuff in 15 minutes. But you're right about the self-care, the rest, somebody when I was growing, we had a lot of factories in my hometown. And
Mhm.
so you would see generations of people working in factories. But one of the things people will always say is, I'll rest when I'm dead.
You're just gonna be dead.
No, you're just gonna be dead. Um, and it is important for us to get that rest, to go. You mentioned this earlier, but the preventative care, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, not
This is
waiting
such a
until.
bad area for us. Like,
Yeah,
which I go consistently to the dentist,
yeah,
but like,
yeah.
it's just such a
Come
bad.
on, pearly whites, go on, smile for him one time. There you go. Look at him.
Yeah, I'm bad about now. I am bad about going to the doctor for preventative care. I go if
Okay.
something's wrong. Like I've been
Mm.
going recently for sciatica, but like I don't think I go a lot for
Like a
preventative
year,
care. Now
like
that I
just
say
for
it
your
out loud.
yearly checkup.
Yeah,
Okay, so you talking to yourself too.
yeah. I'm
Let
always
me,
talking to myself.
yeah,
Even in session with clients, I was like,
yeah,
dang, was that for you or for them?
both as a both and.
Always both.
Yeah, but yeah, that preventative care, right? Because we know that stops things from getting worse.
Mhm.
So I'm hearing you say that Black men need to invest in themselves.
They do. I
Yeah.
mean, but they need to invest in themselves in other ways. I think one of the ways that we invest in ourselves, we're very money oriented. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, we come from a generation of people who didn't have a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People entered this country as slaves and they're always feeling like they're playing catch up in comparison to their counterparts that entered this country. And so there's always this we want to attain as much wealth as we can, but I think in trying to attain wealth, we forget to invest in our physical self and we lose sight of that. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
can't have none of it if I ain't fine. So,
Come on, sir, because I ain't gonna be doing none of that while I'm over here on this breathing machine, in this bed. Yeah, exactly. So are there any books, websites, podcasts, or anything you would recommend for viewers to listen to?
so I have not read a lot recently, and I said I was gonna get back into that. So the next time, claiming that next time you have me
There
on
you
your
go.
show,
There you go.
podcast. So my transparency, I have ADHD. I have a hard time paying attention through podcasts. That is not one of my own strong points. So I do not have a podcast, but maybe I look. I recommend this podcast. Time with Dr. Tarver.
I appreciate that. There is a Black Men Heal that I like a lot.
Okay.
They are on social media and they have a lot of good forums and workshops. There are, I think, a lot of spaces where Black men can go now, and I do think it's important that we talk about that some places are not necessarily healthy.
Yeah,
So we don't want you to go to places that are going to reinforce toxic masculinity, or you not
absolutely.
expressing your feelings, or you not learning how to regulate your emotions and learn how to be in healthy relationships and learn that your identity is not tied to what you do, but who you are. So we do want you to be mindful of being in those healthy spaces. But
And
there are,
also, I'm sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Just
Go
keep
ahead.
in mind too that no podcast is ever going to be a substitution for therapy. If that's what you need, that's where you
Come
need to
on, speak
go.
on it.
They may be
Um,
good for your day-to-day functions, but they're not good for getting true therapy.
Absolutely. And there are, because we're in this virtual environment now, there are more opportunities to have access if you want a Black male provider to a Black
Mhm.
male provider that's licensed in Georgia. So you can get in that space. And now you know a Black male provider that you can be like, oh, hey, y'all do exist. Yes, they do. And they do
And the
great
cool
work.
really thing, we talked about it, me and you talked about it, between they can find providers in other states. They just have to make sure they're a part of our side pack or the
This
counselor
IPAC.
pack. So
Yeah.
there may be an opportunity. You may be able to find a perfect provider. He just might not be in your state, but he's able to
To be,
join you
yeah.
from his state,
Hmm.
depending if he's
Absolutely.
following the rules correctly.
And people will be able to tell you where they're licensed at. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different websites. I want to thank you, Mr. Murphy, for joining Tea Time with Dr. Tarver. I want to just take this time to appreciate you as a Black man for coming on and talking about and being transparent and modeling the types of things that we're talking about, but also just giving us some honest, practical tips about how to love the Black men that we have in our lives, because sometimes we will tell y'all how we want to love y'all versus versus allowing you all to be able to tell us what you need.
Well,
So
thank you
you're
so much for having me and
you are
just allowing
so
me to come to your platform.
Oh, you're so very welcome. So upcoming shows this month, next Tuesday on the 21st, Barbershops, Self-Care and Safe Spaces for Black Men with Reverend Stephen Garrett. And June 28th, Men at the Cross, Pastors and Mental Health with Reverend J.A. Flakes III. As always, it's a pleasure. Thank you all for listening to Tea Time with Dr. Tarver, and be well. Good night, everybody.
Bye, y'all.